The night was eerily silent across the wide ranch land, the kind of silence that presses against the skin and makes every heartbeat sound too loud. A cold wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint creak of the old wooden barn. Inside, lantern light flickered dimly against the walls, casting shadows that seemed alive. The rancher Daniel stepped inside with slow, steady boots, expecting nothing more than the usual check on his horses. But then he froze. From the far corner of the barn came the soft, broken sound of crying. It wasn't the cry of an animal, it was human. His chest tightened as he followed the sound, his lantern swinging to reveal a pile of hay with an old blanket draped over it. The sobs grew louder as he drew near. "Who's there?" Daniel's voice carried the firm edge of a man used to commanding silence from rowdy cattle, but beneath it was a note of concern. From beneath the blanket, a voice whimpered, "Please, don't touch me." The words sliced through the air like a blade, so fragile and desperate that Daniel felt his knees weaken. He lowered the lantern, crouching near the trembling bundle. "I won't hurt you," he said softly, though he could see the blanket shaking as whoever hid beneath it recoiled. For a long moment Daniel hesitated, but something inside him told him he couldn't walk away. He had to know what pain lived under that cloth. Gently, with rough, calloused hands that had roped cattle and built fences, he lifted the edge of the blanket, and his blood ran cold. Beneath the blanket lay a young girl, no older than 20, her face bruised and swollen, her arms covered in dark marks, her clothes torn and dirty. Her eyes were wide with terror, reflecting the lantern light like a trapped animal. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as his hands shook. He had seen injuries before, on ranch hands, on animals, but never such a cruel picture of suffering on another human being. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. She turned her face away, sobbing harder. "Please don't look at me. Please." Daniel felt a weight in his chest heavier than any burden he had carried. "I ain't looking to shame you," he said gently. "Only to help you. Whoever did this, they won't find you here." Her name was Clara. Over the hours that followed, her story came out in fragments, like shards of broken glass. She had fled from a house filled with violence, from a stepfather whose rage turned nights into nightmares. She had run through the woods with nothing but fear pushing her forward until she collapsed in the barn, hiding under the blanket, hoping no one would find her. Daniel listened without interrupting, his jaw clenched with a mix of anger and sorrow. He had known loss, his wife taken by sickness, his only son buried far too young. Pain was no stranger to him. But Clara's pain was different. It wasn't fate that had scarred her, it was cruelty. The next days tested them both. Clara trusted no one, not even Daniel. She flinched at the sound of boots on the wooden floor, hid her face when he spoke too loud, and refused food at first. Daniel, a man of few words, found himself speaking softer than he ever had, leaving plates of bread and stew near her without forcing her to take them. Little by little, the walls she had built began to crack. But trust was not the only challenge. One afternoon, the sheriff rode up the dirt path, his horse kicking dust into the dry air. He asked about a missing girl, showing a paper with Clara's name. Daniel's stomach tightened. If he told the truth, Clara would be dragged back into the hands of those who hurt her. If he lied, he could face the law himself. "I ain't seen her," Daniel said firmly, his weathered face steady under the sheriff's gaze. After a long pause, the sheriff tipped his hat and rode away. Daniel's palms were damp with sweat. He had just risked everything. That night, Clara wept again. "Why would you protect me? You don't even know me." Daniel looked at her with steady eyes. "Don't have to know you to see you're worth saving. Sometimes the right thing ain't the easy thing." Slowly, Clara began to heal. Daniel taught her simple ranch tasks, feeding the horses, mending fences, brushing down the colts. At first, her hands trembled, but work gave her strength. He never treated her as broken. He treated her as capable. When fear tried to drag her back into darkness, Daniel reminded her she wasn't alone. The turning point came one evening as the sun set across the ranch. Golden light spilled over the fields, painting everything in fire. Clara stood near the fence, watching the horizon. For the first time, she let the blanket fall from her shoulders, her scars visible in the open air. She trembled, bracing for shame. Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady. "Strongest thing I ever saw," he said quietly. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of release. She had been defined by pain for so long. Now, standing here with someone who saw her not as broken, but as strong, she began to believe she could be whole again. Seasons changed. Clara laughed again, a sound Daniel thought he'd never hear. She spoke of dreams, studying one day, maybe helping others who carried scars like hers. And Daniel, though still a man marked by his own losses, found peace in being part of her healing. The ranch no longer felt like just a stretch of land. It was alive with second chances. One spring morning, Clara looked at him and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Daniel's eyes softened. Family ain't always blood. It's who stays when the storm comes. And in that moment, the barn that once held only silence now held something stronger, hope. The story's truth lingered like the scent of rain on dry earth. Scars may remain, storms may break us, but healing begins the moment someone sees us not as broken, but as worth saving.